Way up in the tippy top of Western Australia is an epic landscape. This is the Kimberley, and I've been painting this region for many years. Now, I've got a special project. I have to take inspiration from the landscape and create a painting more or less based off imagination, but I am going to use some references to get me going a little bit. And here's the brief. I have to paint a secret waterfall. That's right. I have to create a space with a vertical format painting of a secret waterfall. This is going to my client's home, and he wants to feel nice and relaxed, but also inspired when he looks at this scene. So I come up with 6 different options for him to choose from, working digitally, starting black and white, and then working some color into my designs. Now, some of these waterfalls are based on recognizable scenes in the Kimberley, but I have used a bit of artistic license here and there. Now, I've got my preference, of course. I do like to go for things that are big and dramatic, like King George Falls here. There are some incredible, epic scenes up here in the Kimberley. I squeeze out some oil paint and I'm ready to start working. My clients made a choice by taking 2 of the designs and merging them into one. So I rework this and then project this digital drawing onto my canvas. Now I'm ready to start painting. I work the design up tonally first, identifying where all the shadows are going to be, and then I get out my full palette. And if you want to know what's on my palette here, then check out the full version of this tutorial. It's available right now from my online academy. Links down below. I've got several months of work ahead of me, so I start off with a block end, getting as much information down as possible and staying faithful to that underlying drawing. Strategy here is key, and I'm pretty methodical with my approach, particularly with these big, complicated scenes. So I'm working from generals towards specifics, and by that I mean I start off pretty loose, considering how much detail I've got to pour into this project. And I do start with whatever's furthest away and work my way forward. And it does help taking a layered approach, particularly if you're going to go detailed. Now, there's no exact place in the Kimberley region that looks quite like this, so I do have a bunch of references to refer to. This just helps me get my head around the geology and the flora. What grows on these rocks, and how the heck do you paint these rocks anyway? Some things that really helped me here was a good solid foundation in linear perspective to create a 3-dimensional space on a 2-dimensional surface. You know, that's one of my favorite things about painting anyway, is how do you create something that looks 3D? Like somebody could be sitting there looking at the actual landscape. It doesn't happen with every painting, but when it does, man, it's cool. Loads of fun. So I really want to get that base down first. Get all of the information down, and then I can go about worrying about each individual little aspect of the painting and rendering it. Now, I did feel quite a bit of pressure with this particular project because I know my client actually wanted something very detailed, so I was taking a very careful approach. A key component of this painting is the crystal clear water, very typical of this region of Australia. Get these beautiful little pools that hang at the bases of waterfalls, like little gems in the outback. I want this water to be crystal clear and inviting. My first step is to paint all of the rocks that I can see under the surface of that water. And then once this layer is dried, I'll paint the reflection over the top. But there is another little step between those two, and that's where I'll manipulate the rocks just a touch with some of the refraction. So as water moves, it distorts whatever it's over the top of. It's super tricky to paint, but loads of fun. Now, in some of my other videos here on my YouTube channel, I have talked about the imprimatura, which is that underlying ground or colored tone that I work over the top of. This really lends itself to this kind of subject. You can see a bit of warmth here and there showing through gaps in the brushwork. Even though I'm covering pretty much the whole thing and there's not many gaps left, it still does allow some of that warmth to come through.
If you're after some classical training in oil painting techniques, from the fundamentals to the very knowledge systems of the old masters, then Andrew Tischler is your man.
He has the greatest way of breaking down something fairly complicated and just distilling it and explaining it in a way that you can understand.
My work sort of lacked a sense of direction. He's been a big help and a big influence for me the past few years.
And now I have the boldness to pick up the brush and paint.
And I have the confidence now to go ahead and do some of my own painting.
This is how I used to paint before. This is where I am now. Thanks a lot, Andrew. You have been a great influence on me.
Now you've just heard from some amazing people from our exclusive community over at Tisch Academy. With over 100 hours of exclusive video content, guides, critiques, and royalty-free reference material, Tisch Academy will help you improve your art. Become the artist you are meant to be. Now head to that link below. Starting at just $5 a month, you'll gain the insights to create art you're really proud of. Try it for a month. I guarantee you'll be inspired or your money back. All right, my friend, you know what to do next. Take action. Click that link down below and I'll see you there. Thanks for allowing that little plug there. Let's get back to work. And again, you can see the full version of this on my Academy page, all 3 parts of it. It's pretty comprehensive and there was a lot to this project, as you can see. So then I go about painting some of these fig trees that grow out of those cliff walls. I hope that this will give the overall scene a nice sheltered feeling. Now generally I don't use green straight out of the tube, but for this project I did find chromium green oxide quite helpful. But I do need to earth my greens and get them to coordinate with the rest of the palette. So some of those earth colors like umber, sienna, or even transparent red oxide can really help knock the edge off. So if greens are something that you struggle with, particularly greens out of the tube, I recommend that little hack to try to get them to coordinate a bit better with other colors. Sometimes it can take just a touch of a complementary opposite to just take the edge off. However, other times you might need that intensity, particularly when the sunlight is shining through a leaf. Now my approach to trees is pretty simple. I start off muted and then begin to build in the volume from there. So that's to say, I start off with some darker, desaturated notes of green. So I really focus on some of those darker, earthier notes with more burnt umber coming through. And then I gradually lift the tone by adding more white and then mix in some more of maybe my cadmium colors. A mixture of phthalo green and cadmium lemon is great for that sunlight that's shining through a leaf. Now, working on a big project like this really is a lot to take mentally. So I have to prepare myself and really work on my mindset to just get through it. Now, as you can imagine, with a full work schedule, filming, as well as being a dad, studio time is not quite what it used to be. I really do relish these opportunities to sit at the easel. But to get through a project like this, I had to break it down in stages and literally work in zones. I would set a task for myself for that particular sitting and just try to nail that one part of the project. Now, when I'm working in those phases of blocking in, modeling, and detail. So the block in goes from zone to zone, working my way forward. Then the modeling, I go back to that background and begin working forward again. And then with the detail, it would just be rocks on the bottom right-hand side, or the cliff face on the upper left-hand side, or this fig tree, or that fig tree, and just try to get one thing done so it didn't scatter my attention too much. That way I was able to feel like I was making progress by seeing things slowly come together piece by piece. It's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But I do have to remind myself to chew that bite that I'm working on before taking another one. Now, I really do enjoy working on these paintings and these larger projects. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining because I love doing this. And there is one thing about working on a scene like this is it reminds me so much of being there. And that's what I'm really trying to do with my painting. Now, even though this is an intimate, cozy little scene and a far cry from those epic, big waterfalls that you see in the Kimberley, it still has something that commands attention. I'm really hoping that the end result will be something that makes you want to just sit down and think, relax a little bit, contemplate, maybe just stop for a moment and breathe. That's what I feel when I look at the actual landscapes that inspire me. I have to stop. I have to just let go of whatever I was thinking about. It's not even really a conscious thing. When I'm looking at the landscape, I just notice that I feel better. And so I really hope that my paintings can do that for others, that they'll look at it and I hope it just makes them feel better, or just stop for a second and just chill. I don't know, maybe I'm off on one. Maybe this does something completely different for you. Who knows? But that's what I'm going for anyway. I hope it has that effect. Now, when it comes to painting these red rocks, again, I'm thinking in terms of strategy. Now, generally speaking, when I'm painting anything in light, I use some pretty thick paint. So the light that would be catching along the lead edge and surfaces of these red rocks is going to be a little bit thicker and have some more body to it. This is where liquid impasto can be really handy. And I apply this with a very fine ivory dagger brush or a bristle brush. Now, it might be a bit counterintuitive, but I use this brush like a bit of a spatula, and so it forms a physical protrusion that reflects light back to the viewer. But then for those shadows, I'm using a much thinner mixture. But that's not to say that I'm watering this down with loads of medium. I'm still sticking to that ratio that you probably have heard me talk about before, no more than 1 part medium to 3 parts paint. That goes for the thicker areas and those thinner areas. But I try to keep my shadows pretty thin and those highlights relatively thick. Now, once I'm happy with the overall structure of the rocks and there's light really zinging off that surface, then I'll start planting these little gardens in amongst the crags. And here up in this region of Australia, we've got spinifex grass. And the seed stalks are so characteristic of this region. And I put these in with a 000 ivory rigger. Now, I've got several of these brushes on the go, as you can imagine. What you often can't see is my left hand, which is holding a handful of brushes, and I'm alternating pretty rapidly between them. I've got multiple colors for different brushes. This allows me to keep everything clean on the canvas and on the palette. So if you are trying to paint thin for those shadows and thick for those highlights, how exactly do you do it, I hear you ask, without using a whole bunch of medium? Well, this is when it comes down to just the volume of paint that you're using and the kind of paint that you're using. On my palette, I've got a wide range of colors, but I rely on the actual characteristics of the pigment itself to be able to drive that effect. Here's what I mean. For some of those thicker areas and more prominent highlights, there might be a bit more titanium white coming through. This is a really opaque paint. Great for direct painting techniques where you really want good coverage. But for those shadows where you want some transparency or maybe some thinness, air quotes there, you'll want to go for a transparent pigment. Things like phthalo green, ultramarine blue, quinacridone magenta, or my favorites, transparent red oxide and transparent yellow oxide. A great shadow color for this kind of scene, but also with some shadows in just about any landscape in the immediate foreground where you need something nice and dark. Phthalo green and permanent crimson is amazing. So you can paint that really thinly with a synthetic brush and get that depth in the shadows that you're after without having to rely on black and watering things down with loads of medium. Now, generally, I don't find single photographs to work from and copy. I work pretty differently. So I try to come up with original ideas that are based on references and based on actual places, but I use that reference as information, and I really try to study what's going on. That said, you sometimes can make a few errors here and there whenever you're doing that, going off script, as I call it. You know, when your photograph represents a script that you're following, when you want to veer from that, you're ad-libbing, you're going off script. So to avoid getting caught in the weeds by really going all out with my imagination, I do all of that up front. I get all of this stuff worked out right at the very beginning with that detailed design. Now this can either be digital or done in the sketchbook. I prefer a combination of sketches, little oil color studies, and digital. I love drawing in Photoshop. Now I do have a video coming your way very soon. I'm still working on that, but it's in regards to AI and using AI to design your paintings. But spoiler alert, I don't do that. I'm not going to do that. I don't really see the point or the fun in it because I feel like it's just missing the point entirely. I love to paint. I love to create. So why would I delegate that to a machine? I ended up asking my friend Joe Paquette about this on the recent podcast, The Creative Endeavor, and I'll include a link to that podcast in audio and video form in the description down below. If you're looking for something to listen to while you're painting, then check out The Creative Endeavor. As I'm working on these rocks, I'm thinking in terms of sculpting. I was actually raised by a sculptor, so it's quite interesting how my brain makes these flips between the 2D and the 3D. But I imagine what it was like walking across these rocks, what it felt like, what the strata really looked like in perspective. And so I begin to push and pull the space with varying amounts of paint, both working thick and thin. Some areas between rocks I push in and depress towards a shadow region, and then other areas in the highlight and some of those midtones as well, I start pulling out with thicker paint. It's almost like bas relief. If you've ever seen those frescoes that are sculptural in nature, where you get these scenes that are textured, I kind of feel like painting is almost like that for me. But it's a trick of the eye. It's an illusion. It's something that I'm continuing to work on, and I'm getting closer and closer to that resolve that I'm happy with. This is my favorite part of the painting. It's something that I've been really waiting for. I've saved this as a treat almost at the very end, and I wanted to get everything in its place first before painting this aspect of the water. So here it is. Before I can paint the reflection, I have to really work out what's going on under the surface of that water, and I begin to fragment and distort these underlying shapes and rocks that you see just under the surface. One of my favorite things is this little brilliant highlight that you get in a squiggly line as it works its way across those rocks. Whenever you get light shining through moving water, it shows up as this really cool moire pattern. It's a bit of a trick to paint, and it was hard to get my head around all of these different individual colors. I had about 5 or 6 synthetic brushes on the go at any given time, but it ended up working, I think. Anyway, you can let me know what you think in those comments down below. It was a lot of fun, but it took ages. So this is the second step for how I paint some water. I have various approaches, as you can imagine, but I really love doing it this way, particularly with this kind of water, crystal clear water, where you can really see what's going on below that surface. The Eclipse filberts and 00 and 000 pointed rounds really helped for this. And once again, I'm just going in zones, in pieces. Because this took so long, I could only work in an area about the size of a dinner plate in one sitting. Now, there were a couple of things that were part of the brief that were an absolute must for my client. Somewhere in the painting, he wanted to see a long-necked turtle swimming around in this crystal clear water. It was up to me where I put it, but he just wanted that hiding somewhere around the rocks. I didn't want to be too heavy-handed with it though. Just hide it in somewhere that you might not see it at first. Heck, you might not see it at all if you weren't looking just right. But it would be a surprise, just something waiting there for somebody who is really studying the painting closely. Now, because I'm using Liquid Original, it allows me to layer the oil paint within a pretty short period of time. Generally, the surface goes dry within a day or two, using it at that ratio of 1 part medium to 3 parts paint. This makes layering quite effective, and you can build up layers of detail rapidly. So here I'm painting directly over the top with some reflection, and the color that was essential for this was lead white. It's a transparent white, so it really lends itself to something that you want to be able to see through. Now, I much prefer this to zinc white. As I've mentioned in some of my other videos, zinc is not archival. You want to avoid using that at all costs. It will completely ruin your paintings. Lead white is a way to go. If you want to know where to get that, check out Blue Ridge oil paint. Link is in the description down below. I take each rock individually and reflect it at the point where it enters the water. And then I add this little thing called a meniscus, which is that bright little highlight that is the edge of the water just lifted up, reflecting a little bit of direct sunlight. This can really cause this to pop and make those rocks really sit nicely within the water. Now, the last thing that I had to hide within this painting was a rock wallaby lurking around the cliff tops. I'm going to paint him up here on this rock shelf, just hiding in plain sight. Cute wee fella. He'll be our little secret. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this video.